Hello, I'm Ching Wen, and my group will be covering the topic of confidentiality among adolescents. So first off, I'll be giving the definition and brief explanation of confidentiality. So according to the APA Dictionary of Psychology, confidentiality is the principle of ethics whereby psychologists are responsible for limiting the disclosure of client information entrusted to them during assessment and treatment. So this information can include personal information of clients, their condition, as well as other data that may result from sessions. It is the duty of the psychologist to safeguard and protect the client's information, save for specific situations that may require some of those informations to be disclosed, or if the clients have expressly provided their consent in the disclosure of their information. So the second definition is for adolescence. So adolescence is the range of age whereby it begins from the beginning of puberty and ends around the end of puberty. So that would be around the age of 10 up to the age of 19. So due to the range of ages, psychology would have to adapt to the age of their clients because at certain ages there might be more specific procedures that the psychologists would have to include. For example, say a client is less than the age of consent or below the age of 18. So that would mean that the rights of confidentiality would go to their parents or their legal guardian instead of the client themselves because the client is a minor. So in that situation, the psychologist would have to adapt to the rights of the client's information being owned by the parents instead of the client themselves. So that's it from me for now. I will pass it on to Minha to explain the importance of confidentiality.
Hi everyone, my name is Minha and I'll be further talking on this topic. So now let's look at the importance of confidentiality and why it should be discussed with future clients before conducting the therapy sessions or counseling sessions. So one of the importance of confidentiality is that it encourages the expression of thoughts and feelings. So it helps the clients express themselves and express what conflicts they're going through and basically open up with the mental health practitioner without the fear that the information that they discuss during the therapy session or any kind of session is going to be disclosed outside the therapy room or any kind of counseling room. And in addition to that, it also aids in developing a helping relationship between the client and the counselor. So basically, when you ensure confidentiality, it reduces the reluctance of the client to talk to any kind of mental health practitioner, and it basically encourages them to discuss their conflicts or their feelings and express themselves. And lastly, it also helps the client, like it also increases the help seeking aptitude of the client. So again, when the clients are assured with confidentiality and they know that whatever they're going to discuss within a therapy session is going to be remain private, it increases the likelihood of people to actually seek and go to mental health practitioners and actually talk about their conflicts.
Hi, I'm Shali. Today I want to explain the limitation of confidentiality. Prior to any psychological commitment, the counselor needs to inform the client about the limit of confidentiality and the utilizing information during the psychological session for scientific or professional intention. According to APA, client must be informed about the risk to privacy and confidentiality due to conduction of any services or communication electronically. Example of the circumstances under which confidentiality may be disclosed. First, Disclosure for professional purposes. Mental health counselors may consult with their colleagues or superior regarding their patient's condition. The client has given consent. This is usually obtained by signing the informed consent form. Second, disclosures with public interest. Prevent the psychologist, client, or others from causing to harm. For example, when a client demonstrates their intention to murder during the therapy session, or as information on abusive children or abusive client may be disclosed without consent. Finally, disclosures required by law. Legal proceedings require the confidential information, such as counselor's note of the client, to use in defense for the client during a court proceeding.
Okay, so far we've talked about what confidentiality is, why is confidentiality important, and what are the limitations of confidentiality. So now let's look at the issues that are related to confidentiality. I'll be talking on the confidential issues in a school setting. So, looking at the mental health practitioner that is found in a school setting, it's usually a school counselor, and their role is to promote success rates among students. And this is done by helping them either achieve higher academic performance or higher grades in an academic setting, and helping them manage their emotions and also develop some interpersonal skills such as conflict management or communication skills. And in addition to that, school counselors they also help their students and they guide them through their careers, like career planning. So, for example, they will guide students in choosing their major or applying into universities, or if a student wants to go into military, then they would help the person with the process, the military process as well. So now talking about the confidentiality issues, one of the confidentiality issues is the school counselor's perception on students' confidentiality and their collaboration with other staff members. So what this basically means is how much emphasis does the school counselor place on the student's confidentiality, and how is that affected by their collaboration with other staff members. So, when you're looking at the role of a school counselor, they're usually involved in multiple relationships. So, they're not just dealing with the students, but they're also dealing with school staff such as teachers or coordinators, principals, and all that stuff. And in addition to that, they're also dealing with the school faculty and the students' parents. So, it causes a lot of complex issues regarding confidentiality. So there was a qualitative study that was conducted by TRICE in 2013 in order to find out the construction of ethical boundaries regarding students' confidentiality by school counselors. So when the school counselors were asked questions regarding confidentiality, the main theme that emerged was relationships, so multiple relationships. So some of the school counselors that were participating in the study, they were opposed to the idea of having multiple relationships because they felt like it caused ethical issues in confidentiality. However, some other school counselors they were in favor of these multiple relationships. They feel like it guides them in who to consult as well as what information should be shared. And in addition to that, all participants stated that some of the students' information is actually given out to other people, if only if they feel like it's necessary for the students' well-being. But this could be influenced by how much information. This could be influenced like how much information the counselor gives out to the other person could be greatly impacted by the level of trust the school counselor themselves has on the other person. So, for example, if the school counselor is really good friends with another school member, the school staff, then they're more likely to give out more information about a particular student as compared to someone who they don't. Confidential issue that arises is the student's confidentiality and the parents' involvement. So this is basically concerned with the responsibility that the school counselor has in maintaining the students' privacy, at the same time uh, informing the parents on the treatment progress, because according to the law as well as the code of conduct, for example the APA code of conduct, the parents have the right to know about their child, like the whole counseling procedure related that the child is undergoing. So yeah, and in this case scenario, it is important that the student is kept as the priority, and the parents are actually considered as partners in the counseling sessions. So now let's look at a case scenario. So this is the case of Donna. So Donna is a school counselor who shifted from practicing privately to school practice. So when she started her school practice, she noticed that there was a huge difference between the two types of practices, particularly in related to confidentiality issues. um, she noticed that she is constantly bombarded with questions from school staffs regarding the clients that Donna is dealing with. Um, so she receives questions like, which students are in your counseling group, or how is Jeremy doing, or have you contacted her parents? So, and Donna also noticed that some of the staff asking these questions were not even related to the student at all in any way. In other scenarios, the principal or parents of Donna's clients would ask for specific questions. So, in order to deal with these circumstances, Donna learned the importance of making everyone aware of her client's privacy in order to avoid ethical conflicts. So this case scenario, it exerts an emphasis on the role of the school counselors in spreading awareness on the confidentiality of their students, um, by promoting the awareness among parents as well as school staff, and always keeping the students' privacy as their priority. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening.
When it comes to suicidal clients, there are a few issues that the counselor or the psychologist has to be aware of. The first of which is the decisions regarding suicidal clients are highly dependent on the psychologist's assessment of the client. So, in an article written by Wingate and Joyner in 2009, they stress that a psychologist must be cautious with their decisions regarding the client's condition. So, although this represents one of the few times that a psychologist is allowed to break confidentiality because the client is at risk of bringing harm upon themselves, there are a few categories or levels of threat that the counselor has to assess before the counselor is allowed to take any actions that may breach confidentiality. So, for example, say a client possesses suicidal ideation, but they do not have a concrete plan or method in which to fulfill that ideation. Um, if a counselor is trying to be overly precautious with the client's condition and they decide to take actions such as hospitalizing their client, um, this is a breach in confidentiality as well as a breach in the client's rights. But that being said, a psychologist cannot take their client's condition too lightly, because if they wrongly assess the client to be of low risk when the client is actually of high risk, such as already having a plan or a method in which to fulfill the suicidal ideation. So this leads to detrimental effects on the client's well-being. The next point is that because we're dealing with clients who are adolescents, and adolescence is the range of age from 10 to 19 years of age, clients that are below the age of 18 are unable to provide consent. They are considered minors, and therefore the rights of confidentiality is typically held by the guardians of the client, such as the parents. So if that guardian requests the client's information, the counselor would have to consider if they are willing to divulge that information to the legal guardians. So this isn't a concern if the client permits the counselor to divulge the information, or if the client themselves are willing to divulge the information to the legal guardians. However, the problem stems from if the client themselves are unwilling, or they are unpermissive to the idea that the counselor would share certain informations with their guardian. Say, for example, the client has suicidal ideation, but they are unwilling to share that information with the guardian. So, because the psychologist is primarily responsible and they have a duty towards the client's well-being, if they were to divulge the information to the client's legal guardians regardless, this would put the rapport that the client has built with the counselor at risk, and it may also lead to the condition of the client to worsen. So, say for example, the guardian requests the information, and the client is unwilling to part with that information to the guardians. According to Brooks et al. In 2013, what the counselor can do is that they can try to explain and inform to the client that they are obligated to share that information to the client's guardians when requested. However, in doing so, they provide the opportunity for the client to sort of filter the information that would be shared to the guardians, where they could approve certain information being shared to the guardians, as well as request certain information to be withheld from the guardian. And when the counselor goes to disclose the information to the guardians, they also are able to inform the guardians of the client that they have a duty first and foremost to the well-being of the client, and therefore certain information that the client is unwilling to share, the psychologist would have to try and keep it confidential, but they are willing to share certain information with the guardian. So this allows the guardian to also know that they will be receiving the information that they requested. However, the counselor will not be revealing any information that is unrequested by the guardian. So alternatively, what a counselor could also do in order to mediate is that they could conduct a shared session with the client and the parents of the client in the same session. So what this allows the client to do is that they are able to share only the information that they are willing to share, and the counselor is able to prompt questions that would allow the requests of the client's guardians to be fulfilled, and the clients are allowed to withhold certain information that they are not comfortable sharing with their parents or guardian, and share the ones that they are comfortable in sharing. So, in the case study on suicidal clients, there was a case called the case of Tim, which was conducted by Esposito and Smithers et al. In 2004. So this study was conducted by interviewing Tim's mother, Jane. So, according to Jane, Tim had no prior attempts of suicide um, or or left any notes behind before their suicide, and his mother also described him to be a troubled youth. Um, at the age of 11, he began acts of vandalism and theft, and as he got older, his criminal records got um, worse, in the sense that he moved on from theft and vandalism to other crimes such as acts of violence and even arson, where he had set his classroom on fire. So the mother also stated that Tim had a relatively short temper and that was he had a tendency to be violent even towards his own family. So over time, she began to notice that along with all those issues that Tim was going through, he also began to develop feelings of self-loathing. In one of the times that he had expressed his self-loathing, he had expressed it to his uncle, where he said that he despised himself for acting the way he does and for all the things that he has done without having a reason for them. And he even has gone as far to say that he himself saw himself as being a burden towards their family, especially towards his mother. So, following that, at the age of 14, Tim's mother brought him to a psychologist who had told Tim's mother that beyond a low self-image, that he had no other signs of destructiveness, and he determined that Tim did not require any form of counseling or therapy. And 3 years after that, at the age of 17, Tim took his own life by committing suicide through inhaling the exhaust fumes from the car. So, according to the commentary provided by David A. Jobs in the case study, he believed that with everything that Tim had gone through, that there was a distinct lack of response from his mental health contacts. He opined that due to Tim's record of misconducts and behaviors, that he would have actually required psychotherapy, and that the psychiatrists had been too lax in their decision on their assessment of Tim, and that they had made the wrong decision. So that's it from me. I'll pass it on now to Salini. Thank you.
So, this confidentiality issue arises when counselors deal with dangerous clients. Counselors can handling those clients by the legal and ethical guidelines. Confidentiality is hardly required, and counselors must acknowledge their role of ethics. Patient's confidentiality clearly states the privacy of the client has never been unconditional and must be maintained in circumstances such as the personal safety of an individual. Confidentiality conflicts normally happen when the psychologist assumes one of the clients as a direct risk to a possible danger to themselves or a third party. Counselors are generally able to avoid aggression by applying common counseling guidelines. For the counselor, there are plenty specified methods. The main goal should be to hold the client on treatment or to help manage aggression. Only as a final option, a counselor must issue a warning to the third parties or legal guardian. In case of uncertainty, the counselor may reach another mental health specialist for consultation. Such details can only be shared to others with the consent of the patient or legal guardian of the patient, except in such extraordinary conditions which may lead to obvious danger for that individual or for someone else. For example, the third party may have some potential advantages by alerting them, including saving the third party and also protecting the client from performing acts that may ultimately affect the client. Besides that, a lot of psychologists might be facing a dilemma at any moment in their career path, which one of their clients threatened them. Statistics shows about half of the psychologists experience a violent attack, verbal abuse, or even other harassment by the client. Statements such as the disclosure of confidential information should take ethical and legal requirements into consideration. The APA Ethics Code offers a strong initial guide to assess how clients' confidentiality and therapy safety are balanced. So, psychologists have a fundamental duty to safeguard sensitive information and take appropriate precautions. Nevertheless, it requires confidential information to be disclosed in such cases if allowed by the law, in the absence of the patient consent, with a legitimate aim such as protecting the client or psychology. So here is the example, the case of Tarasov. Prosenjit Porter, a California Berkeley International resident, was distressed after his love was rejected by a student named Tatiana Tarasov. Porter got obsessed and tried to stop the girl. After 2 years of continuous misbehavior, Porter looked for psychologists for guidance to overcome the depression and told the therapist he was planning to murder the girl Tatiana, who refused his love. The psychologist informed the campus security to apprehend Porter on the basis of the clinical perception that Porter was suffering from delusional schizophrenia and raised a killing threat to the girl. Porter seems to be sane to the police after the detention, and Dr. Harvey, the superior of the psychologists, ordered his freedom. The psychologist has never informed the girl or of parents about the threat. A few months later, Porter implanted a plot to stab the girl till death, which he disclosed to his psychologist at the beginning of the therapy session. The parents of the poor girl report Porter's psychologist for not alerting his daughter or them about the threat. The, the court states under several situations, even if the action resulted in a violation of confidentiality, this might be important for the psychologist to take steps to secure the third parties against the dangerous client.